Salutations! I'm Backwater J, and welcome to j-mutations, where I'll be demoing some of the mods that I've done on my various instruments. We'll be starting out today with my iconic Jaguar, specifically the j-guar Vintage Modified Jaguar. Now, why j-guar, you may ask? Well, first of all, they are substantially cheaper instruments, in price, not in quality. Second, they are closer to the pre-CBS Fenders than anything Fender is currently putting out. The main difference being the 9.5-inch radius on the fingerboard, which frankly I find plays better than the 7-inch radius on the classics. The Vintage Modified series has recently been discontinued in 2019 to be replaced by models in the Classic 5 series. In my opinion, Vintage Modified are the better instrument, which mainly boils down to the pickups. The Vintage Modified have the Duncan design, which is Seymour Duncan's Made in Korea series, which are still good quality pickups, basically sound identical to the Seymour Duncan Vintage series. The Classic 5 have the standard Fender pickups, which are good pickups. I just find the Seymour Duncans a little bit better. So a little bit of brief history about this instrument. The Jaguar was actually the second Fender instrument with this basic body style and configuration. Its big sister, the Jazzmaster, as its name implies, was Fender's attempt to break into the jazz audience, which was dominated primarily by Gibson at that point, with no success. Jazz players still did not play the instrument. The main difference between the Jazzmaster and the Jaguar are two things. One is that it was a longer scale length, similar to the Strat and Tele. The other is the pickups were substantially different. They were very wide and flat coil, which gave it a response much more like a P90 or even a humbucker pickup. They're very popular guitars among various genres, but I'm not here to talk about the Jazzmaster, I'm here to talk about the Jaguar. So, when Fender, learning from their experience, who did pick up the Jazzmaster and play it a bunch was surf players. So when they went in for round 2 with the Jaguar, they actually went to these surf players for advice. So among the input that they got from these players was the shorter scale length, the toggle switches for the pickups, and I believe the chrome plates instead of the plastic pickguard were also player inspired. So it was very much a player's instrument. It was very much at the time Fender's top of the line instrument. A lot more features than the Strats and Teles at the time, or any time. A Strat is a Strat is a Strat. So let's look at the stock features on this instrument. So the first thing you'll probably notice is this distinctive floating tremolo tailpiece and rocker bridge. Very unique setup, very unlike most of what Fender does. Feel-wise, this is very similar to a Bigsby, but the arm has more travel, which I like, and it is one of the most stable trem systems I've ever played on. Really, about the only thing that preserves stability better than this would be your various locking trems, which personally I don't like the feel of, and I don't like hassling with. You've got, as I mentioned, the 24-inch scale. Now, you either love this scale or you hate it, and most of the people that hate it because they haven't really properly set their instruments up. The main thing you need to know about short scale guitars is that short scale, bigger strings. I find 10 to 12s are a good range to shoot for depending on your playing preferences. That, when set up properly, eliminates fret buzz, good sustain, good playability. The heavier strings bend like lighter strings on the shorter scale guitar just because there's less tension on them. Now, a word about setup. These imported instruments are going to need it. The bridge that mine came with basically had a tendency over the first few playings to slide down on the post because the threads weren't quite tight enough. I find Elmer's glue after a little bit of experimentation fixed the problem entirely. Now the bridge is pretty rock solid. Anyways, so let's go to the pickups on this. So at first glance, these will look like a Strat pickup, which they basically are. But there's two distinctive differences with these pickups. One is that the pull pieces are flat and not staggered like a Strat pickup, which will give you a more even response across the strings. Now, if you're hardcore Strat player and you like that distinctive Strat tone, this may not be for you, but I enjoy it. The other difference here is the metal shield or claw that is around the pickups. This is obviously to improve grounding and shielding on the pickups, which it does, but it also has the side effect that it gives it a little bit more of that Tele bridge pickup sort of bite to the sound. So, to me, it's a very pleasing sounding pickup, and one of the things that attracted me to this guitar in the first place. Now on to the electronics. This is where things can get a little more complicated because of the mission control vibe this guitar gives off. It's not as intimidating as it looks. But basically, the Jaguar, like the Jazzmaster, is a dual circuit guitar. With the selector switch in the down position, you're on the rhythm channel, which is operated via the switches and knobs under the strings, just like any normal guitar. The up position runs it through a lead circuit, which is for the neck pickup only. This runs it through its own dedicated volume and a very dark tone control. So it's good for a lot of those dark jazzy tones that nobody plays this instrument for. But it's also good distorted leads and things of that variety if you just really want that buttery, bassy single coil type of sound. Oh, if you're looking carefully, you may notice that we have here 3 pickup switches for 2 pickups. Now this third switch in the rear here is one of the distinctive features of this guitar that is not used on many other instruments. It's used on the bass 6. That's the only one that pops into my brain. But this is what's called a strangle switch. In the on position, what this does is it runs the signal through a small capacitor, which basically has a sort of an inverse tone control type of effect. It will bleed off a lot of the low end frequencies as opposed to the highs. So it's good for that thinner, kind of more vintage type of tone. In any case, you guys have probably heard the Jaguar demoed in its various configurations. I'm not going to waste too much time on that, but I do want to set a baseline just so you can hear how these tones sound through my rig for the purpose of comparison. Now I will be using a Black Star Club 40 on both the clean and distorted channels. Got the distortion dialed in, or the overdrive, excuse me, dialed in quite low, which is still pretty crunchy on this amp. And I will be using that in the reverb exclusively, no other effects, again, so that you can hear and compare the actual tones that you're getting out of this instrument. Let's get started. That's a pretty impressive array of tones out of this stock 2-pickup instrument. But I decided that my OCD self needed more. So I rigged up a way to combine these 2 pickups in just about any possible way. This is an inexpensive mod. Really the only major components that went into it were two push-pull, double throw pots, and a good deal of wire. I did replace the knobs with chrome knobs. That's purely cosmetic because I like the chrome knobs better. Now, the switch on the volume knob here engages both pickups in series mode. Now, in order for this to function, both pickups do need to be in the on position. If one of them is off, the switch on this knob is non-functional. Now, single coils wired in series have tonal capabilities much more like a humbucker, although the spacing of the coils creates a somewhat unique sound of its own. Now, I do find that this tone tends to get a little bit muddy, so particularly if you're using a lot of distortion, a good idea is to engage the strangle switch, which helps to bleed off some of those lows and make it a little bit more manageable of a tone. It's also a higher output tone because they are wired in series. They're adding and not subtracting, basically. But let's give that a listen. Now the switch on the tone knob is a phase switch. This takes one of the pickups and reverses basically the direction of the wiring by switching the leads. Now on that note, if you're doing this modification to any guitar, it's very important to run a separate ground wire from the actual shield of the pickup, because otherwise when you switch it out of phase, that whole thing becomes hot and creates a ton of noise. Now, phasing the pickups on most modern guitars, they are reverse polarity from each other, which means that when they're in a normal mode, they will noise cancel with each other. But when you have the phase switches engaged, you are going to hear more of that 60 cycle hum. That's a byproduct. What the phasing does is it partially cancels the signal of the other pickup, so that what you get is a characteristically thin, somewhat softer volume tone. It's a very cool effect if you know where to use it. Let's give that a listen. Now, let's flip both of these switches on and see what the guitar sounds like out of phase and in series. Now the other modification to the lead circuit has to do with the tone knob, which is now no longer a tone knob. Basically, this is an idea that I lifted off of the Fender Broadcaster before they normalized that to a normal tone control. This is a blend knob, but I've expanded a little bit on the Broadcaster's capabilities, and instead of working only on the bridge pickup, this will now work on either the neck or bridge. When the other pickup is off, it will blend in some of the signal from that pickup. This is an inverse control like a tone, so that at full bore, at 10, you're basically hearing the one pickup by itself, and all the way down at 0, you're hearing both pickups at equal volume in parallel, just as if you'd switched them both on at the switch. But of course, those in-between tones give you a lot of cool options. So let's have a listen. Now there's one more setting I'd like to show you on the lead circuit, and this is actually one of my go-to tones. It's very cool, gives a nice edge to the tone. This is actually the tone that I used on the Dirty track on my upcoming REM parody. But this is what happens when you use the blend knob and the phase switch together. Let's have a listen. But wait, there's more. You remember that rhythm circuit that only works for the neck pickup? Well, with the new modification, it will also work for both pickups when they're wired in series. Now, this is a very dark tone, so it's best for clean tones, or at least not distorted rhythm. It's got a good kind of buttery lead sound if you want to put some, distortion, put some fuzz on it, but it will get very muddy very quickly if you try to play chords. Anyways, let's have a listen. So, that's the rundown on the Jaguar. If you found this demo informative or helpful or entertaining, then please like. If you want to see more of these videos, more of my mods, ride-sharing videos, general geekiness, please subscribe and hit that notification bell. And as always, please feel free to comment on my mods or your mods or what have you in the comments below. Thanks for watching.